everybody. Today Rahdo runs through Time Stories Lumen Fidei, which I believe is Latin for the light of faith. I'm going to spend a few minutes today talking you through the basics of what's new in the latest expansion for Time Stories. Although, before I get going, I should point out a couple of things. One, obviously, Time Stories is very spoiler sensitive, and I don't want to spoil any of the big elements of this game. So what I'm going to do today, I'm about to open this box, and I'm just going to show you the first 60 seconds of what happens when you first experience the game. Obviously, I'm not going to go into great depth. I'm not going to ruin the story. I'm not going to tell you how to solve any problems. All I'm going to do is just give you the basic bit of a taster. You won't leave this walkthrough knowing much more than you would just from having looked on the back of the box in a store. But I do think it's important that you watch just a little bit more, because number two, before I get to that, I am actually going to talk about a huge game-breaking mistake, a game-breaking typo error that was made on one of the cards in this that could basically make the game unfinishable if you don't know about that. So even if you want to avoid spoilers, stick around for a little bit. I'm going to open the box, and before I get to anything, I'll tell you how to avoid having the game ruined. Hugely important. So let's jump right into Lumen Fidei. You open the box, and what do you find? This is a first. 3 decks of cards. You've got your main one, and then you've got Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. So right off the bat, that's something a little new, a little different. Of course, all these decks, you don't get to see what's in them until the game tells you to open them up. And now this is where the spoiler comes in. Chapter 1 is fine. Chapter 2 is fine. Chapter 3 has a major goof in it. So let me go on ahead and open it off screen. What I would suggest you do, and to know more about this, you can go to the Time Stories FAQ, which is maintained by Paul Grogan. It's absolutely excellent. The links for it are down in the show notes. But here is the gist of it. This is card number 124. I don't think this is really telling you anything other than at some point there's a door. Yes, there is a door, everybody. Card 124. I'm not going to flip this card over, but here's the deal. It's possible for you to reach this card during the game, and because of choices you've made, after you look at this card, the game becomes unwinnable. And that is because the developers in the English version, I don't know if this is true for the original French, forgot to mention something. So what you need to do, once you get this game, if you pick it up, and for my money, I strongly suggest you do. I'll talk more about that in my final thoughts, but for my money, this is the best Time Stories has given us so far. But anyway, get out some Post-it notes, write down, take item 14. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, take item 14, because this card should tell you to take item 14, and it doesn't. Don't look at it. Just, take the sticky note, put it on the back like this, and then put it back in the deck where it's supposed to be. And then don't look at Chapter 3 until the game tells you, and you will not get stopped in your tracks. Absolutely essential that you do that. Sorry that we had to go that, but anyway, that's just a very important caveat for Chapter 3 of Lumen Fidei. But now we got that out of the way, hey, let's go into 60-second spoiler territory. I'm going to open up the first deck. Of course, it comes wrapped in cellophane, this bag's a little bit small. Here we go. Don't want to spoil. And hey, here's the first deck of cards, which, by the way, is interesting. This is almost as thick a deck as what the other adventures are. So this, I haven't double checked, but I believe Lumen Fidei has more cards in it than any other adventure to date, significantly more. But anyway, because I'm not going to be talking about Chapter 2 or 3 other than that little proviso. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the intro. Hey, here we are at the base. I'm not going to read this to you. You can read it if you want. Pause the screen, go ahead and read it, or not. And then, hey, we are at the base. And there's good old Bob and Sam and some information about where we're going. Just standard par for the course stuff. And long story short, again, it pretty much tells you this on the back of the box. We are going into Crusade-era Iberian Peninsula. We are going to be occupying the bodies are the receptacles of a Christian military order delegation that has been sent to deal with some Christian military organization stuff, some Knights Templar type business. But that's what they're there to do. We are here to find a mysterious stone that should not be there. And again, if you want, you can be pausing to read. Sam gives you a bit more information about the history of the time. And this history, maybe more so than any other time stories to date, is really important. It plays a big part of the gameplay. Now, here's the basic mission parameter stuff. Our characters have dexterity, combat, and diplomacy. Those are the 3 stats. They have different strengths and weaknesses. Also, every character has a special ability, but they have a limited number of times they can do it. And so players, when you choose your receptacle, they get these little, use the blue tokens to indicate how many times they can use their special ability. If you get KO'd, if you get knocked out and then you come back to life, you refill your special ability so you can keep on using it. I'll talk a bit more about those when we get to the characters. And then there's a little bit more. So here's where probably the single most important element of this shows up. I mean, we're finishing up setup, and it tells you, hey, take the faith table and put it in Codex slot 1, then put the plans out, the map. We're going to start on the beach. We got our mission successful stuff. And this is an interesting thing. We start with 10 time units. And it doesn't matter how many players are playing. We start with a fixed 10. Unlike all other time stories, this one, it doesn't care how many players are in the simulation. You always have a fixed amount of time. And let's see, what's the last little bit? Right, and now this explains what that faith table is all about and how to set it up. So let's look at this. They talked about the faith table. We have to put this in, Codex slot number 1 over there. And we have the special rules that remind you of how this faith table works and what impact it has. Of course, we're going to put out the map, which shows you a Crusade era castle that we're going to explore. There we go. At the beginning of the game, there are, oops, I've totally put this upside down. All right, that's the chapter house. Here's the beach. The beach is where we start, and right off the bat, there's one other place we can go, and you can see there's more stuff, but obviously we have not gotten access to any of those other chambers yet, so we're just going to start out on the beach. But let's come back to this faith table. Here's the way it works. You take a heart marker, and based on the piousness or impiousness of your group of players, you will be somewhere on this faith table. You can be up here on the top half and be a true believer, or you could be down here and be kind of impious, is what the game calls it, or wicked, or, we're still Christians. I should say, every single character that we jump into, the ones we can choose from, they are all members of this Christian delegation. Here's all the items we got, a whole bunch of items. There's the win-loss. And the 6 characters we can choose from, Jean de Craon, or Fabiola de Leon, or Maria Concepcion, or Johann Krieg, or Ramon, or Francisco. Each one of these characters is a member of the Christian delegation, but they are either pious, pure, true believers, or they are impious, which means they're still Christian, but they're a little bit wicked, just a little bit. And these symbols for impious and pious, you will see pop up many different times over the course of the game. For starters, it comes down to defining your character group. when you're looking at characters, they've got their backstory. Each one of them has a special power that they can use. You can pause if you want to see what these special powers are. And again, you only get to use them a certain amount of times. They've got their backstory. They have different stats, and of course, they have armor effectively and all of that. Different levels of dexterity, persuasion, and combat. But the most important thing about them is whether they are pious or impious. What you do is, let's say I'm playing a 3-player game, and I choose to have one player is Francisco. I play Francisco. Jen chooses Fabiola, and then Gertrude, our beagle, is playing with us. And Gertrude has a thing for nuns, and so she decides to be Maria. And these are our 3 characters. So what we've got here is 2 pious characters and an impious one. So we take the piety, which is 2, minus 1 means our overall stat on the faith chart. Let me get a little heart out. is we have 2 minus 1 means our group, we are believers. Yeah, but we're not quite virtuous and we're not quite pious. If I had gone for 3 pious characters, we would have been 1, 2, 3. We'd be all the way up here to pious. On the flip side, I could have gone with 3 impious characters, morally questionable characters, in which case we could be all the way down here, penitent, infidel, or even heretical. So, what does that mean? Well, the main thing it means is you'll notice over here on the left, there are bonuses to your skill checks. Every time you have to roll a die. Since we're going to be starting out with this particular group of characters, 2 pious and an impious one, we're believer, we get no benefits. But if we'd started with full piousness, every pious character, if we make it up to pious, gets +2 successes to every die roll they will ever do. Now, on the flip side, if we're starting out here as a believer, and say over the course of the game, we stumble across a card that has this icon on it, the impious icon. If we do what that card says, we will become, as a group, a little bit more impious, and we will drop on the faith table. As soon as we drop, any impious character we have gets +1 on their rolls. So suddenly, Fabiola, who is particularly good at diplomacy, not very good at fighting, kind of okay at dexterity, all of a sudden she's getting +1 to every one of her rolls, making her the most powerful character in the game. And now here's the interesting thing. You might have a tendency, I think most players would have a tendency to want to be pious, be a force for good in this world and all of that. So you want to go up. Here's the thing. At the believer and virtuous levels, you get no bonus. It's not till you make it all the way up to pious that you get a bonus. But holding on to that piety can be tough. If you make it all the way up here, throughout all of these chapters, you are going to be tempted. You are going to see this impiety icon show up every once in a while, and it's going to say, hey, if you do this, you're going to drop 1. If you try to stay the straight and narrow, as soon as you drop, you lose those bonuses. And then you might be thinking, well, what the heck? Let's go in for a penny, in for a pound. Let's drop all the way down. Let's become heretical, because then, and this ultimately goes into how you build your team. Do you go for a team that is all one or all the other? Now, of course, if you're playing a 4-player game, there are only 3 pious and 3 impious characters. So you might go pious, pious, pious. One person, at the very least, in your team of 4 is going to be impious. But still, that puts you up to virtuous. So you can't quite get the good bonus. Arg! But on the flip side, when you're making your team, if you go all impious with Jean and Fabiola and Ramon, and then say, okay, 1 pious person comes along, Francisco comes along. Now you've got 3 impious plus 1 pious, puts you at infidel, and all your impious characters become more powerful because they get +1. So that is, right off the bat, there is a more impactful element of party creation in this game than has ever been true in any other time story. I mean, it makes such a huge difference. Of course, you are going to get the opportunity to occasionally do pious things as well. You might want to, help people out who are in trouble, and you look at the card and it says, oh, if we do that, we become more pious. And that could be a problem for, because, hey, we're all heretical. Yeah, we're the jerks of this world. We don't help nobody. We do all kinds of nasty, wicked things if we need to, because we're impious. But then you decide, I want to help this person in need, or whatever it might be, and then you bump up. That knocks you from heretical to infidel, and then you lose some of your heretical bonuses on the rolls, and you become less powerful. So there's like I said, probably the coolest thing about this is the melding of gameplay, choosing your character based on their stats, based on their special powers, and based on, their leaning on this morality scale, and that directly impacts your temptations from a story point of view. As you're going through here, you're having to decide, am I going to do good things? Am I going to do bad things? And that will directly have an impact. So morality is a big part of this game, and that's very, very cool. Between that, between this faith table and the fact that the game comes in multiple chapters. And there's other cool stuff that's going to happen in here. I'm not going to tell you about any of that. I don't want to spoil anything. I just wanted to show you the basics of what's new about this game. And the main thing is that piety chart that can have a huge impact on dice rolls. Because if you know time stories, you know dice rolls are a very big deal. They happen a lot. Now this is an at-a-glance card. Hey, here's a reminder of what all the icons do. Here's a reminder of how all this piety stuff works. There's one other thing I should mention. There's one other icon, unique locations. Sometimes when you go to an area, the cards will have this symbol on it. And in fact, the very first place we're going, the beach, which is where we start, has this icon. What that means is, don't worry, I'm not actually going to reveal the contents, the story contents of any of these cards. But here's the deal. A one-time visit to a location, like, say, the beach here, which again, this symbol means it's one time. And again, if you want to, you can read this as a little introduction. I'm not going to read it. It just sets the stage for where we are, what's going on, and what we can explore. If you want, you can pause that and read it. But here's the thing. Whenever you see one of these icons, it effectively means that not only is this a place, this is a moment in time. This moment in time, when you've got this guy on the horse on the beach, and you've got these people over here by this wagon, and you've got this guy taking a look at you, this will only happen now. This is a very interesting change to time stories. In all the previous time stories, you go into a location, there's a bunch of people standing around, you talk to them, you get information, etc., etc. But then what ultimately happens is those people are literally frozen in time. You can go there, talk to them, leave and come back, and they'll always be there in exactly the same state. That does not happen in Lumen Fidei. If you want to interact with these people, you've got to do it now, because you won't get to come back on this run. It won't be until you run out of time and then you have to start over that this moment in time exists again for you to explore and interact with. This puts a lot of times in the game a really interesting element of immediacy, because we don't have as much time here. Never mind the fact that, remember, like I said, as part of setup, you only start with 10 time. And that, there's some other rules to that. If you read the cards, you saw how it works. You ultimately get more and more time. But there's just more pressure on you to make smart decisions, because not only do you have less time than normal before everything resets, but you can't go and revisit the same place over and over again, because these are just quick moments in time, and after you leave, there's no going back, at least not until you fail and start the whole time process over again. So anyway, that's it, folks. That's where I'm going to stop. I'm going to get off now. You can see the art style is, it's a new artist, hasn't worked on any other time stories, I believe, and it has much more of kind of a graphic novel, almost like a French graphic novel feel to it. It's a bit more stark, high contrast. You can really feel the baked heat of the sun everywhere in these adventures as you're traveling through it. Jen and I definitely felt it. Of course, we're playing this at the height of summer in Malta, so we were physically feeling the heat as we traveled through these areas. But you're going to have like always, a bunch of mysteries to explore, backstories to learn, puzzles to solve, all of that business. But I'm going to leave that up to you to discover if you decide to explore Lumen Fidei. And that's it, folks. That was just a quick talk through, a quick intro, the first 60 seconds of the game. And now if you want to hear some spoiler-free final thoughts, you can hit that I in the top right corner of the screen or follow the show notes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.